Hello Flight Simmers and welcome back to Alpha Hotel Flight Simulator Training. This video is part 2 in a two-part series taking an in-depth look at how to use the Working Title Garmin GNS 530 and 430 GPS receivers. These receivers are installed in numerous aircraft in Microsoft Flight Simulator, both default and third-party aircraft. And with Working Title's upgrades to these units, they are feature-rich GPS receivers that can greatly enhance your flying experience, regardless of what type of flying you do. In the first video, we covered the basic capabilities of these receivers, the upgrades that Working Title made to them in their update, the basic controls and displays, and some of their basic navigation functions such as direct-to navigation and creating flight plans. If you're not familiar with the basics of working with these units and haven't seen that video, I'd recommend checking it out before watching this one. I'll leave a link to that video in this video's description. In this video, we'll talk about some of the advanced features of the units, some of the details that have been put into them by Working Title, and some of the ways you can customize them. I'll also mention that I have a video series on the original Asobo GNS 530 and 430 on this channel as well, but it's not necessary to watch those videos to learn how to operate the new Working Title units. I've included everything you need to know to operate the Working Title versions of these receivers in these two videos. All right, so the first feature we're going to talk about is the VNAV feature, or the VNAV function. This is significantly different from the VNAV function in the G1000 in that it does not give you any sort of glide path to follow, and it doesn't tell you in terms of distance where your top of descent is. What it does is it gives you a countdown timer to tell you when you should start your descent to make the descent point that you've selected. And then we'll also give you some information about vertical speed, what vertical speed you should use if you miss the top of descent and you still want to hit that descent point and you can't use your selected vertical speed anymore. One caveat about using the VNAV mode in both the 430 and the 530 is that you need to have a flight plan with at least 2 points loaded up for it to be able to function, and we'll see why here in just a little bit. If you don't have anything entered in here, or if you're just going direct to another airport, then it will not work. You need to have a flight plan with at least 2 points. To that end, I did load up a simple flight plan here from Pine Bluff Airport in Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Identifier there is Kilo Papa Bravo Foxtrot. To Carlisle Airport in Carlisle, Arkansas, with the identifier of 4 Mike 3 on that airport. It is located about 40 miles to the north of Pine Bluff. To access the VNAV function on the 530, you just hit the VNAV key, and that brings up the VNAV page. On the 430, there is not a VNAV key, but there is an extra nav page. So you roll to that last nav page, and that is where your VNAV or vertical navigation page is. So looking at the two pages, they are very similar. They both have target altitude, target position, vertical speed profile, and vertical speed required, or VSR. The only difference is the 530 has a status box, and this is what tells you when you should start your descent. It will have a countdown timer, which we'll see when we do a demonstration here. So in the target altitude, you want to set the altitude that you want to cross your target position at. The target position is where you set the point that you'd like to cross at that altitude, and you can set it. You can select any point from your flight plan, which is why it only works if you have a flight plan, and enter it in there. And you can choose to cross it before or after that fix, and you can adjust the distance before or after that fix that you want to cross at this altitude. You can set the vertical speed profile, which is the rate of descent you'd like to use to get down to that point. Usually taking your ground speed and multiplying it by 5 is a good way to get a good target rate of descent for most aircraft. And then the vertical speed require will show you what rate of descent you need to use if you were to start down from your present position and present altitude to hit this point at the selected altitude. And then the status will show you in minutes and seconds how long before you should initiate your descent at your targeted vertical speed profile. It's a little easier to see when you're actually looking at an example, so let's go ahead and get in the air and take a look at an example. All right, so we've taken off from Pine Bluff. We've climbed to 3,500 feet, and we are proceeding now direct to Carlisle Airport after exiting the pattern there at Pine Bluff. So let's take a look at an example of how to use this VNAV system. So I will hit the VNAV key on the 530. I will hit the middle of the small right knob to activate the cursor. I will roll it with the small right knob to get that cursor field active and be able to move the cursor around inside that field. And then I'm going to set my target altitude. Carlisle is at an elevation of 241. So the pattern altitude up there is probably about 1,300 feet. And I want to be at 1,300 feet or at pattern altitude 4 nautical miles before I get to Carlisle Airport. So that's what I'm going to set up in here. So I set 1,300 feet in this top field, and then I hit enter. Then I use the big knob to change where the cursor field is. I don't want to change this distance, but I could change that if I wanted to. I do want 4 nautical miles before Carlisle. I could go and I could also change the before to after, so I would cross it after if I had multiple points and wanted to do something like that, but I'm going to leave it before. Then I'll roll over to actually where the fix goes here and roll this cursor here. The only point left in the flight plan now that we've taken off from Pine Bluff is Carlisle Airport, so that's what we'll use. We'll hit enter there, and that starts to populate our other fields here. We'll go ahead and roll the cursor down to the vertical speed profile, and we'll use a small knob to move inside that cursor field, and we'll set 500 feet per minute because we're doing about 100 knots, just a little bit over that. And that's the target vertical speed that we want to use. We'll go ahead and enter. We'll go ahead and hit the cursor button to get that out there, and you can see it tells me that if I were to start down right now, my vertical speed required would be 132 feet per minute to hit 4 nautical miles before Carlisle Airport at 1,300 feet. But it tells me that if I want to use my vertical speed profile, or the vertical speed I entered in the box here, then I want to begin my descent in 11 minutes and 35 seconds. And so that is the VNAV function on the 530 and the 430. Again, it's not going to give us any sort of path information. If we get to this point and we don't start down, you'll see this tick up towards 500 feet per minute. And then if we get to 500 feet per minute and we don't start down, this will continue to tick up to tell us, hey, if you still want to make this point at this altitude, you're going to need a higher vertical speed than what you have entered here, but the status box will disappear. So that's how you know you've passed your top of descent. Again, there's nothing that displays on the map to show you where your top of descent is. It doesn't give any glide path information. About the only thing you get, other than what's on the VNAV page, is about 30 seconds before you get to your top of descent, it will flash a little message up here that tells you that you're approaching your VNAV profile. So it's a very simple system. It can remind you when you need to start down, but that's all that it does. Another thing we can use the VNAV function for is crossing fixes on IFR procedures at certain altitudes. If they have procedure altitudes in them, or we're cleared to cross them at certain altitudes, we can use it for that. We do have to engage a little bit of trickery with the 530 and 430 to get it to do that. And again, it's just going to give us a countdown timer. It won't give us any sort of glide path information. So for an example here, I am still navigating towards Carlisle Airport, still about 30 or 35 miles to the south, but now I'm going to navigate on to the RNAV GPS approach to runway 9, and I'm going to use Quito as my initial approach fixes, which is the initial approach fix from the south. The procedure altitude from Quito to the intermediate approach fix is 2,500 feet, so I'm going to assume that ATC has given me clearance to cross Quito at 2,500 feet and has cleared me for the approach. So to get my GPS to tell me when to start down, again, I want to go to the VNAV key. I want to push my cursor and change my altitude field here. So I'm going to enter 2,500 feet in here. And then I'm going to roll it down to the target position. I can't set 0 here, but I can set really close to 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set 0.1, and that will pretty much give me good guidance to get to this fix at that fix at that altitude. I'll go ahead and hit the enter key to enter that. Then I'll go to this field and I will enter my fix. You can see it has all the fixes on the arrival or on the approach here. I want Quito or Quito, so I'll enter that. and it tells me if I want to cross Quito at 2,500 feet, or zero point 0.1 nautical miles before Quito at 2,500 feet, and I want to use a 500 foot per minute descent, then I need to start down in 2 minutes and 12 seconds. And if I want to start down now, I need to use about 350 feet. Again, no vertical guidance. We just get the countdown timer at the vertical speed required. So the rest of the features that we are going to look at are incorporated on the individual pages. So we are going to go through and do a deep dive on each individual page to show you what features are available on that page and then the ways that you can customize that page if possible. The first page we'll start with is the nav page group, page 1 on the 530, and we'll go through the 430 first, or excuse me, the 530 first, and then we'll take a look at the differences on the 430. Nav page 1 is considered your default nav page. It is a little weird that the system boots up into page 2, but nav 1 is considered the default nav page, and you can access it either by using the right knob, or you can access it by hitting the clear key and holding that for 2 seconds. You can see that says default nav, and that will take you to this page from wherever you are in the GPS. So nav page 1 has your moving map in the center, and again you can use the range buttons to zoom in and out on this map. And it will display things like airports, VORs, it will display your course line, and it will display airspace, and it also displays water. You can customize what's displayed on here, and we'll go through how to do that here in just a little bit. In addition, it has 5 data fields. It has 3 at the top and it has 2 at the bottom. And these data fields are customizable, with the exception of the center data field up at the top. That will always show your aircraft's current track. But the rest of these fields are customizable, and so you can change what is displayed there, and we'll go into how to change that here in just a little bit as well. Down at the bottom, you have your waypoints, the waypoint that is the most recent waypoint that you have passed, or your origination airport if you haven't departed yet. And then it will have the active waypoint on the right that you're currently navigating to. Down in the center, it has a course deviation indicator, and this is the same course deviation indicator that it shows the same information that it will show on the nav display that you have coupled to your GPS. So we can customize what's displayed on any given page and how it's displayed using the page menu for that page. And to get to the page menu, you just click the menu key while you're on that page. So we click menu, that brings up the page menu. On this menu, anything that is blue is an option that is not currently enabled. It's not something we can interact with. And then anything that is white is something that we can change. To navigate between the menu selections, we use the large right knob, and then we hit enter to actually enter into the dialog to change it. So the first option we have on nav page 1 is to display NEXRAD. That is weather radar, basically satellite weather radar that is transmitted to the aircraft. We don't have a radar on board the aircraft. This works for both live weather to display what's actually going on in the world, but it actually does display something if you have custom weather set as well. To activate, all we need to do is highlight this field and then press enter, and that activates the weather radar. And then if we hit menu again, go into there, see it says now hide NEXRAD, which tells us it's currently on. We hit it again, now NEXRAD is off. The next thing you can do is go down to change the data fields, and you can see when we hit enter there, it highlights desired track. Again, to change between which field you want to customize, you use the large right knob, and you can only customize the outer 4. You can't customize the track. And then to actually change the field, you want to roll the small knob. And so the options we have for putting in there is bearing, which is the course that you want to steer from your present position to your next waypoint. If you're off course, it will give you the heading you'd want to take up or the course you want to take up to go direct to that fix from where you are rather than intercepting the course. Distance just tells you the distance to get to the next fix. That's already in there as one of the options. Desired track, again, is what the course is from, basically what the magenta line is depicting, what track would keep you on that magenta line. Estimated time of arrival will tell you when you're going to get over your next fix in terms of time on the clock. ETA will tell you how many minutes and seconds before you reach your next fix. And you can see there's a number of options that are in blue here that we can't use. Ground speed will give you your current ground speed. TKE is track angle error, which is how many degrees you're off your course right now. Track is your aircraft's current track, which is again displayed at the top. VSR is vertical speed required if you're going to use the VNAV mode. And then cross-track errors, how many miles you are off course if you're not on course. So any of those 4 fields can be changed into any of the fields that are listed here. Once you're done customizing the fields the way that you want them, all you need to get out of the customization selection there is just hit clear, and you can see the highlight goes away there, and we're back into normal operating mode. The last thing that you can do is restore the defaults on this particular map, and that will restore all the fields and those sorts of things back to the way they were default. So it'll reset all these fields back to desired track distance, ground speed, and ETE. One other thing I want to mention about this map is that this map is always oriented aircraft track up. Some maps have the option of being oriented north up, so they look like a normal map. But this particular nav page does not have that option. It will always be track up. Moving on to nav page 2, this displays a map that can be oriented north up. You can see currently it is in that north up mode. It by default does not have any data fields displayed, but we can do that through the menu options. So if we take a look at our menu options on this page, it's got the setup map, and this actually sets up map options for both this page and for nav page 1. If we hit enter in here, we have a group here that we can use our small knob to change, and so we can change settings for the map, for weather, for traffic, for waypoint, and for airspace. We can see the maps options. Oops, let's see here. I got into weather here. We'll hit map. So the maps options are whether or not we have the display oriented north up or track up. We can change it to a track up map like nav page 1 by selecting that option and hitting enter, or we can just leave it in the north up. And it has options for auto zoom as well, which is where it will automatically set the zoom for you on this map. So if you want to use those, you can do that as well. Use the big knob to change where the cursor is, and then use the small knob to change that cursor field. So we use the small knob to take a look at our other options. Weather, we don't have any options currently. Nothing is enabled there. Traffic, you have the option to choose what kind of traffic is displayed, if you display all traffic or just certain types of traffic, and at what distances on the zoom certain fields are displayed. You also have the option to change where you see waypoints, and this is all kinds of waypoints. This includes your active flight plan, where you see the magenta line basically, how far out on the zoom you're going to see medium airports, small airports, large airports, intersections, NDBs, VORs, and user waypoints. And then you can go down here to these fields and change, for example, with a medium airport, if I want to start seeing those, say at 25 nautical miles, I highlight that field and then use the small cursor to change what distance, what zoom level I'm going to see that out. So if I pick 50 nautical miles, now I'm going to see those medium-sized airports when I am zoomed out to 50 nautical miles, and if I go to a zoom range that's above that, I will no longer see those. So that is what these fields are for, and you can use this to kind of declutter your map. For example, in DFW, there are a lot of Dallas-Fort Worth area, there's a lot of medium-sized airports that will display, and that's where I've got my flight plan originating out of right now. So I might want to go and choose to display that at a smaller zoom range so the map is not quite as cluttered. And the last option here is for displaying when airspace, or for choosing when airspace is displayed, but currently none of those options are enabled. So we'll hit clear to get out of that menu level, and then we'll hit the menu key to go back in. The next option that we have here is whether or not the data fields are on this particular map. Just like the other map, the map nav page 1, we have the ability to display data fields. They are off by default, but by selecting enter on this menu option here, we can turn them on. And again, we can customize those waypoint or those data fields by hitting menu and then change data fields, and you get most of the same options. Again, it highlights which waypoint field. We have a total of 5 of them that we can change and customize, and we can choose from mostly the same options that we had on the other page. Really, the only one that we didn't have was the ability to display what waypoint that we are navigating to. And other than that, all the menu options are the same for as far as what we put on our data fields over here. Then the other menu options that we have on this page are to display or hide the next rad. If you select this on either page, nav page 1 or nav page 2, it would toggle the next rad on and off for both pages. And then the last one is to restore the defaults for the data fields. Nav page 3 is what we call the terrain display page. This page displays any terrain that is between 1,000 to 100 feet below your aircraft's current altitude in yellow, and any terrain that is 100 feet below to above your aircraft's current altitude in red. Basically, the way that you should think about this is anything that's in yellow is that at your current altitude you will not have adequate obstacle clearance, at least for instrument flight. And then anything that's in red, you stand a good chance of hitting that terrain. So that's a terrain impact kind of a warning. As far as the menu options on this page, if we click the menu, you can see we don't have the ability to inhibit terrain. It will always display. We can choose to see a 120 degree view, which gives you 120 degrees in front of you. So basically you're only seeing the terrain that's in front of you. And you have the option to do a 360 degree view with the aircraft at the center of the display, so you can see the terrain that is all around you. The other thing that you can do is you have the option to hide aviation data if all you want to see is the terrain, and this hides things like airports and VORs from the terrain view. You'll also notice when we're on the terrain view, we'll actually see terrain displayed in the top left corner, and then it will give your GPS estimated altitude at on the top right corner. You can see that is pretty accurate as to what our altimeter is saying right now. So it's a pretty good, if you were to have an altimeter failure, you could probably safely use this in emergency to determine what your altitude actually is. So going to the terrain page, if you had that sort of a failure, is not a bad idea. So nav page 3 is your traffic page. So if you are using TAWS and looking for other traffic, then that is where you will see that on. There are no menu options for this page. And then our last page, nav page 5, is going to be that satellite information page that we saw when we first booted up before it went over to the nav page, the number 2 nav page. So this shows in this corner, it shows a picture of basically if you're looking straight up, so your aircraft is basically here, and if you're looking straight up at the sky, this is the position of all the satellites, and Working Title has actually accurately modeled where these satellites are, so this should be a pretty accurate position based on the day that you load it. And then the green bars indicate the signal strength, and green indicates that the receiver is using that satellite to determine its position. Over here we have some nav accuracy information. The status up here tells us that it is engaging in 3D navigation. In other words, it's determining the position both horizontally and vertically using the position information it's getting from the satellites. And then the HFOM is a horizontal figure of merit. This is basically an estimate of the accuracy of the GPS. So it believes with 95% accuracy that the position it is estimating for the receiver is within 16 feet of where the receiver actually is. To put that into perspective, the wingspan on the Cessna 172 is 36 feet. So it basically thinks it is estimating the position of the GPS of the box itself within about a third of a wingspan of the aircraft, which is pretty darn accurate. VFOM is the vertical figure of merit, which is the same sort of thing, just for vertical accuracy. So it's not quite as accurate vertically, but it is still pretty darn accurate. And then EPU is estimated position uncertainty, just another estimate of how accurate it believes its navigation is, and its position estimate is. It believes it's accurate within 0.03 nautical miles, which again is pretty darn accurate. And then down here on the bottom left, we have the current aircraft's current lat long position, and then you have a clock that shows you, this is Zulu time, says UTC over here. I believe there is an option where we can change that. And then your GPS estimated altitude. And just like the traffic page, there are no menu options on this page. So moving on to the waypoint pages, basically the waypoint pages can give you information on airports, on waypoints or intersections, and on nav aids. The first several pages give you information on airports. Waypoint page 1 is just a general information page about airports. It will default, I believe, to your departure airport here. But you can actually activate the cursor and go up and change that to get information about any airport that you'd like. Just give you general information that gives you the identifier that it's a public use airport, gives you the official name of the facility and what city and region it's located in. It gives you the lat long of the airport and gives you the elevation of the airport, and then it gives you I guess probably the most precise type of approach that's available here. In this case, we do have an ILS here at McKinney Airport. Then if you go to the next page, this is a runway page. It'll give you an airport diagram. It will tell you the runways that are available over here, and then it will give you the length and width of that runway and then what type of service it is. If you have multiple runways, you will be able to activate the cursor and go into this field and take a look at the different runways. For example, let's change our airport data block here and make it into Dallas-Fort Worth Airport, KDFW. You have to type kind of slow with this. And so that brings up DFW, and then it goes over to this cursor field here for the runway, and it will let us get information on any of the runways there at DFW. So you can see we pull up 17 left, 35 right, and it gives us all the information on that runway. We can scroll the cursor again and get information on 17 right, 35 left, and it gives us information on that runway. So that's how we can get information at airports that have multiple runways with this waypoint page. Waypoint page 3 gives you a list of the air traffic control frequencies available at that airport. So it generally is going to list them in the order that they are going to be used. And then a handy feature with this page is if you push the push cursor button on the small right knob and activate the cursor, and then use the big knob to change where the cursor is, then you can scroll down to these different frequencies, and then you can load them into the standby frequency on the unit that you are working on. So right now, if I wanted to dial in, say, ground control for McKinney Airport, I can go down and select that, highlight that, and then hit enter, and that puts the ground control frequency in my standby comm radio there. So the next 3 pages have to do with instrument procedures available at that airport. Basically, it gives you a list of the procedures that are available at that airport. So you can see it's still got McKinney in here, and under the approach it says ILS 18, but if we hit the cursor button again and use the big knob to scroll down to the list of the approaches, and then use the small knob, we can actually scroll through all of the approaches that are available at that airport. And it will show us all of the transitions to get in there, and then we can actually select transitions, and it will bold that transition for us. And we can actually load approaches from this page as well, but we'll get into that more when we get into instrument approaches. If we go to the next page, it gives us the instrument arrivals into this airport. And again, we can, it's got a diagram of the entire arrival and all the transitions, and then it has the transition that is selected, bolded for us, but we can again use the cursor and select any procedure or any arrival at this airport and any transition, and we'll put a little diagram up here for us of that procedure. The next page is going to be your instrument departures, and the same sort of thing. You can select the cursor here and select through a list of all of the departures available. You can see if any of them are runway dependent, and then you can look at the transitions and to see where they go. So the last three waypoint pages give us information on waypoints and nav aids. The first one is the waypoint page. Again, you can activate the cursor in this field and enter any traditional intersection or GPS waypoint that you want, and it will give you information on that waypoint. It tells you the region it's in, it tells you the lat long of that position of that fix, and then it gives you the nearest VOR, the radial that it's on, and the distance from that radial. The next field or the next waypoint page will give you information on NDBs. You just enter the identifier. It will tell you what city it's near. It will tell you the region. It will give the lat long, and then it will give you the frequency. It also tells you whether or not it has a weather broadcast on it, which is not really something we need to worry too much about in Flight Simulator. Same thing, it can be done for VORs. You enter the identifier of a VOR. It will give you the name of this facility. It will give you the region. It will also give you the magnetic variation of that VOR. Again, gives you the lat long. Again, gives you the frequency. You cannot use this page to select the frequency and enter it into the GPS. You can do that on the nearest page, but not this one. And then it will tell you again if there's a weather broadcast, which again on Flight Simulator there are no weather broadcasts going out of any of the nav aids, so it's kind of irrelevant. And then the final page doesn't work quite right, at least it doesn't appear to right now. It should be a place that you can create user waypoints, or if you have created user waypoints, then you will be able to pull those user waypoints up in here. I've tried to enter a user waypoint in here using a radial and distance, and it wasn't letting me do that, so I don't think it's working right now. But if you know anything about that and you know how to use this page correctly, then leave a comment in the comment section. So moving on to take a look at the aux pages. The aux pages on the 530 is where you will find some of the peripheral features, such as the calculators that's available on aux page 2. And the aux pages are a lot like the menu pages in that the bright green options are options that you can interact with and change, whereas the green ones are features that have not been enabled or features that we can't currently interact with. So aux page 1 has your calculators, and we'll go into how those work in just a sec. Aux page 2, there's nothing that's been enabled on that page yet. Aux page 3 is mostly settings for the GPS, so you can go in and change things like how your units are displayed in nautical miles or statute miles, those sorts of things, and we'll go and take a look in detail on those here in just a little bit. And then aux page 4 is where you go and change whether or not the unit is functioning as an SBAS receiver, which is the ground-based augmentation system. You can actually go in and turn that off so that the receiver acts like an old-fashioned unit that did not have that ground-based augmentation. So aux page number 1 has our 3 calculators that we can use in order to interact with us. We just push the middle of the small right knob to get the cursor active. Then we can use the big knob to scroll between the selections here, and then we can hit enter to actually enter the calculators. So we have a fuel planning calculator, a trip planning calculator, and a density, altitude, true airspeed, and wind calculator. So let's take a look at the fuel planning calculator. I'll hit enter to enter the calculator, and like any other calculator, we just enter the fields, the data fields, and it gives us a data output field. So the top box up here is the data entry fields, and then the bottom field is the data output, and it gives us information there. So for the fuel planning, we have basically a point-to-point fuel planner here. We enter 2 points, and then we can enter our current fuel on board. We can enter the fuel flow, and we can enter the aircraft's ground speed. And then it will come back and tell us the fuel that's required to get between those 2 points, the landing fuel on board, or how much fuel we'll have left, I think in hours and minutes there. No, actually that's going to be in gallons once we land. We'll have the landing reserve, that will be in time. It will give us our efficiency, which is basically nautical miles to the gallon, and then it will give us our range in nautical miles based on our current fuel state, fuel flow, and ground speed, and then our endurance in time. So let's take a look at an example here. If you highlight a field and then you hit clear, it will enter your present position. That's what PPOS stands for, is present position. So we'll go from present position and let's go up to, let's say, Fort Smith, Arkansas. The identifier on that field is Kilo Fox Sierra Mike. Fort Smith Regional. Go ahead and hit enter. And then current fuel on board, we have a full tank, so we have 53 gallons. And it really doesn't matter if you decide to put pounds or gallons in here, as long as you enter it both items in the same units here. It will just do the math for you. I'll go ahead and enter in gallons. We have 53 gallons of usable gas on board the airplane right now. So we will enter that. Use the big cursor to move between fields. To actually manipulate the fields, you hit enter, and then once you have the field entered, then go ahead and hit enter again. That'll let you move the cursor again. Actually, I'm sorry, you use the small knob to actually change what's in the field there. Our fuel flow on this aircraft is, we'll say, 13 gallons an hour. Seems to be about what we get on the 172 in Flight Simulator. I'll hit enter again, and then the true airspeed. I've been getting about 115 knots of ground speed at 5,000 feet with no wind, so we'll enter that. And then it tells us that in order to get from our present position, up to Fort Smith at the 53 gallons, or excuse me, at 115 knots with 13 gallons per hour of fuel flow. It tells us we're going to need 19 gallons of fuel, that we'll have 34 gallons of fuel left when we get there. That's equivalent to 2 hours and 35 minutes at our cruise speed at that cruise fuel flow. We're getting about 8.8 miles to the gallon, not the most efficient vehicle out there. And our range at this fuel flow and with that amount of gas is about 469 miles. That is our range to empty tanks. So we would want to be on the ground by the time we get to that distance. And then our endurance, how long we can fly with that amount of fuel, is 4 hours and 4 minutes. So that's the basics of how the fuel planner works. To get back to our main aux1 page, we push the middle of the small right knob again, and that brings us back to the page. So let's take a look at the trip planner. And this gives you information on, again, a point-to-point flight. And you enter your departure time, you enter the points, you enter the departure time, you can enter the date, and then you can enter your ground speed, and it will give you the desired track to get to that point. It will give you the distance to that point, the estimated time en route, and the ground speed that you listed. It will not populate ESA. That's the en route safe altitude. It does not have that information. It will give you an estimated time of arrival if you put both the time and the date in there. Although it will not give you the sunrise and sunset data. That data is not loaded into Microsoft Flight Simulator, so it can't generate that. Again, like with the fuel planner, if you start to enter data in the field and then hit clear, it will take you from, well, no, I guess it won't do that. I thought it was present position. So we'll take a look at a flight between KTKI, and we got to do that a little slower, KTKI, which is McKinney, which is where the aircraft is currently located. And then we will go up to, again, Fort Smith Regional, so KFSM, and enter there. And then we will put a departure time of, it is currently noon, I think is what I have the clock set to here. And this is a 24-hour clock, so if you want to enter something in the afternoon, you got to go beyond noon. So we'll put a 12 o'clock time. Then we'll go ahead and enter the date. If you don't enter the date, it won't give you the estimated time of arrival, so you do need to do that to get the date. So we will say it is 15 of June of 2023. So there's 15 June 2023, and then we'll assume our ground speed is going to be 115 knots. And then we hit enter, and it tells us desired track to get to Fort Smith from our present position is a 040 bearing. It's 170 nautical miles. Our estimated time en route is going to be 1 hour and 28 minutes. And if we leave at noon, our arrival time will be 13:28, so 1:28 in the afternoon local time. And you could put Zulu time or local time up there. It really doesn't matter. It's going to do the same math regardless of what you put in there. Again, it's not going to populate ESA or sunrise and sunset data. It just doesn't have that data in Microsoft Flight Simulator. So that is how the trip planning computer works. So let's take a look at how our last calculator works, our density, altitude, true airspeed, and wind calculator. We're actually going to do this in flight, so we have some real data to work with here. And it actually does need your ground speed and takes your ground speed information to determine the winds. So this is not accurate unless you actually use it in flight for some of the data fields it produces. So we can go into here, and what you want to do is you want to put your indicated altitude in here. So we're currently at 5,000 feet. So we will enter that. You want to enter your calibrated airspeed. You need to get this from the book. I'm just going to assume that we are pretty close to our indicative airspeed of 105 knots. So we'll put that into the computer here. 105 knots of indicated or calibrated airspeed. We want to enter the current altimeter in the next field. So I just have it set to the standard of 2992 on that. So we will enter that in there. And then we enter our temperature at our current altitude. So currently we have a plus 14 degrees Celsius. And you actually can roll over here to plus or minus if you do have a negative temperature. Put in 14 degrees, and then it asks your aircraft's current heading to determine the winds. Currently we're heading, it looks like, about 321 degrees. So we'll put in that. And it looks like the first two fields are actually 2 digits that can roll, and then the last one is going to be a single digit. Enter there, and then our data fields come back. So it tells us that the current density altitude at the temperature that it is outside currently. We are at an indicated altitude of 5,000 feet. The density altitude of the aircraft, the altitude the aircraft is acting like it's performing at is 6,052 feet. Our true airspeed is 117 knots, and then it is calculating that our winds are 293 at 3 knots. So that's what our winds aloft are, and that equals a 3-knot headwind. That's just probably because I didn't enter the calibrated airspeed correctly. I do have calm winds set up right now. But this can help in, if you're using real life weather. If you put all this data in here, you can figure out what the wind is doing, and it will tell you what's going on there. So that is how you use the density, altitude, true airspeed, and wind calculator. Looking at aux page 3, this is a lot of our settings for our GPS. If you go into units, positions, this is where you can set whether you want magnetic heading or true heading to show up, whether you want your distances and speeds in nautical miles or kilometers an hour. Let's see what our, so you can do kilometers an hour, or you can do nautical miles, or you can do statute miles. So you can change here that. So altitude, if you want that in feet or something else. Pressures and temperatures and fuel. If you'd like to convert that to something other than what's in there, this is where you do it. Again, just use the cursor button to get the cursor active. Use the big button or the big knob to move the cursor, and then hit enter to roll the small button to actually change what's in the field. So the date and time is where you can change the format of what the GPS clock displays. So we hit enter on this, and it automatically gets the date from the sim. It shows the current date rather than the date that you selected. It does show the time that you have selected, however, and there is no way to change those. And then you can select what format that the clock displays. You can select UTC, and it'll display just like this up here. It'll show a 24-hour format and then have UTC at the end. But you can also select it to do local in 24 hours or local in 12 hours. If you do that, though, you have to then go in and set your time offset. For example, we're in Texas in the central time zone right now, so to set that correctly, I want to set it to -5, and then it will show the correct time because I've set it to not 15, 5. I've set it to show 10:13 out here right now. And the central time zone, this time of year, you want a -5 offset from UTC. So now it is showing it's 10:13 a.m. Local time. So if you want to change the clock format and have it display local time, that's how you do that. So the display black backlight, you can go in and normally it's on auto, but you can change it to manual and then you can change the level here. It only changes one single digit at a time though, so if you want to turn it down, it's going to take a very long time to do that, so I'd recommend just leaving it on auto. But if it's too bright for you, you can come in there and change it in there. Nearest airport criteria is where you cut down on the amount of data that you see in the nearest pages. So right now it has any runway surface and any length showing, but I can highlight those cursor fields and scroll down and go to where it's only showing hard surfaced runways or just hard and soft runways, or if I'm a seaplane and I only want to land on water, I can select that as well. And then I can go down to the next field here and I can select a minimum length. Say if I'm flying a King Air, with this GPS and I want a 3,000 foot runway, I can put a minimum length of 3,000 feet and it won't show me anything in the nearest pages that's under that length. Uh, the other things that we can do here is the comm configuration and change the spacing on our frequencies we select here. It defaults to 25 kilohertz, which is the standard in the United States, but you also have the option of going down to 8.33 kilohertz, which gives you more frequencies, but you have to roll through more frequencies to get where you want to go. That is the standard in Europe, so if you are flying in Europe, then you might want to select that option, particularly if you're using a virtual ATC type service. So the final page in the aux pages is the SBAS selection. This is where you can turn those ground-based GPS augmentation systems, that portion of the receiver, off. So if I hit the cursor button and hit enter, it gives us all the different regions that we have. We have WAS in the United States, EGNOS in Europe, and so on and so forth. So if I want to turn my GPS receiver from a WAS-capable receiver to an old-fashioned just LNAV receiver, then I can turn that off and I will no longer be able to fly LPV approaches. I'll have to fly the old-fashioned LNAV approaches without the vertical guidance. So if you're wanting to fly those types of approaches, you'll want to come in here, turn that to off, and then you can fly those types of approaches with this GPS. Finally, the last group of pages is the nearest pages. We have a nearest airport page, a nearest intersection page, a nearest NDB page, and a nearest VOR page. With the airport page, it lists the airports that are closest to you, your current bearing, what heading you would want to fly, or what course you would want to fly to get directly to that airport. Then the distance you are from that airport, what kind of approach it has, if it has an ILS, a RNAV approach, or if it's just VFR and doesn't have any approaches. It gives you any relevant frequencies, usually the control tower. If there's a control tower there, it will give you the length of the longest runway. And then you can see it's got this little blue bar here telling us that we can scroll all the way down to see more runways. To do that, you want to push your cursor button to activate it and use the big button to scroll, and you can scroll down and it's listed in the distance from you, and that does refresh as you fly. If you decide that you need to go someplace, say in an emergency situation, you want to divert directly to that particular airport, you just highlight that airport and hit the direct key, and then hit enter, and then it highlights activate. You hit enter again, and it will activate a direct route to that airport. So that's very handy to have in emergency situations. On the intersection page, it lists your nearest intersection. It tells you what type of intersection it is. It gives you your bearing from your current position and the distance you are from that intersection. And again, you can highlight that and go direct to it just like you can with an airport. On the NDB page, it gives the identifier. It tells you the bearing to the station, the distance from it, and it gives you the frequency. This page is pretty handy if you want to practice with NDBs on finding them, finding if there are any near you, and then looking up the frequencies. And you can do the same sort of thing, highlighting, going direct. And then the VOR page gives you the identifier, what type of VOR it is, if it's a VOR, VOR DME, or VORTAC. Again, bearing and distance, and then the frequency. In addition to going direct, the other thing you can do is with your cursor, you can highlight over the frequency field and then hit enter to enter that frequency into your standby field for your VOR radio. So let's take a quick look at the differences in the 430 pages versus the 530 pages. You'll notice that nav page 1 is significantly different. Instead of having a moving map, we just have a big CDI up here, same CDI information that's displayed here, and then this will display on nav number 2 in this particular airplane, assuming we are in GPS mode. Then we also have our fix list here, our fix data box here that shows the fix that you're going from and the fix that you are going to. And then below that we have 6 data fields, which are defaulted to cross track, distance, track, ground speed, bearing, and desired track. And just like our data fields on the nav page 1 for the 530, the 430, you can also customize these fields. Just go into the menu, change fields, use the big knob to decide which field you'd like to change. And then you can go in and roll the small knob to actually change the field. Again, it's the same options in terms of what you can display in here as you had on the map page on nav page number 1 in the 530. But by using this, if you have dual 430 and 530, you can choose to display quite a bit of information because you have 4 customizable fields up here, 6 customizable fields down here. So you can display pretty much all of the information that's available to you in your choices for what the field displays between these two units. The rest of the nav pages are pretty much the same as what they are in the 530. You still have the secondary moving map. You again have the options to turn the data fields on, and you can set up your map as to what it displays. Be aware, I believe that if you go and set up your map in here, I think these changes carry over between the two units. So you are going to affect what's displayed on the 530 by changing it on the 430. Nav page 3 is still your terrain page. Nav page 4 is still your traffic page. Nav 5 is still your satellite accuracy information page. And then we have the 5th page is the VNAV page, which we talked about earlier. Rather than having a dedicated VNAV key, we have the VNAV function located at the end of the nav pages. The waypoint pages are pretty much the same as what you get in the 530. They're just a little more compacted here than they are in the 530 due to the reduced screen size. Your aux pages are pretty much the same. They don't have the exact same things listed on each page, but I believe every feature that's available here is available on the 430. It just may be listed on a different page again because the pages are smaller. And then the nearest pages work pretty much exactly the same. You have a nearest airport, nearest waypoint, nearest NDB, and a nearest VOR page. So all those pages are the same. That concludes this video. Hopefully it's given you all of the information you need to customize your GNS 530 or 430 and take advantage of some of its advanced features. As always, if you've enjoyed the content, please don't forget to like the video, share with your friends, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell to be alerted to new content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.